The biting wind howled a mournful dirge across the wreckage of the Silver Dawn. Twisted metal, once proud wings, now jutted from the snow-choked earth like skeletal fingers. Anya, cursed artifact collector and survivor of the crash, shivered, not just from the cold, but from the unnatural stillness clinging to the frozen landscape. This wasn't just any mountain crash. It was a tear in reality, a gash in the veil separating Erthos, the mortal realm, from the Whisperwind, a plane of swirling magic and forgotten gods. The Silver Dawn had been carrying dignitaries, merchants, and herself. Her purpose had been shrouded in secrecy, paid handsomely to transport a seemingly innocuous, intricately carved wooden box. Its cursed energy thrummed even now against her gloved hand, nestled safely within her satchel. The curse, a slow corruption of the soul, was a price she willingly paid for the power to detect and contain other, more dangerous artifacts. She was a warden, a jailer of the survivors, a motley crew of 20 souls, huddled around a meager fire, their faces etched with despair and fear. Brother Silas, a gaunt priest of the sun god, mumbled prayers, his eyes wide with a fanaticism that bordered on madness. And then there was Kale, a stoic warrior with eyes as gray as the storm clouds gathering overhead. He was the quiet strength, the unspoken leader, the one everyone unconsciously looked to for guidance. Anya, ever the observer, kept to the fringes. Her long, dark cloak concealed not only her worn leather armor, but also the countless trinkets and charms she wore for protection. She was an outsider, a scavenger of the past, unwelcome in polite society. That night, the wind howled louder, carrying whispers that clawed at the edge of sanity. The fire flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced with the wind. Anya, her senses heightened by the cursed box, felt it first. A tremor in the earth, a pulse of raw magic that resonated deep within her bones. The Whisperwind was drawing closer. "Something's coming," she muttered, her voice barely audible above the storm. Kale, ever vigilant, turned to her, his gray eyes piercing through the darkness. Revealing her true nature, her knowledge of the arcane would paint a target on her back. But lives were at stake. The Whisperwind. It's not just a storm, it's a place, a realm of pure magic. This crash, it weakened the barrier between worlds. Valerius scoffed. "Magic? Nonsense! We crashed because of faulty engineering, not fairy tales." Alara, however, looked at Anya with a shrewd glint in her eyes. "You know more than you're letting on. What can we do?" Anya explained cautiously about the weakening barrier, about the creatures that dwelled within the Whisperwind, creatures drawn to breaches in reality. "How?" Kale pressed, his voice tight with urgency. Anya glanced at her satchel, at the cursed box. "There's a way, an artifact. It can mend the tear, but..." She trailed off, unwilling to voice the terrible price. "But what?" Alara demanded. "It requires a sacrifice," Anya said, the words heavy with dread. "A soul willingly given to fuel the artifact's power." The silence that followed was deafening. Valerius paled, sputtering protests. Silas began to chant louder, his voice cracking with desperation. "There has to be another way," Ilara said, her voice trembling. Anya shook her head. "There isn't. I've studied this artifact for years. It's the only solution." The moral dilemma hung in the air, a suffocating weight. One life to save 20? A seemingly simple equation, yet fraught with unimaginable consequences. Anya knew the weight of such decisions, the ghosts that would haunt her for eternity. But inaction was not an option. The Whisperwind would consume them all, transforming Erthos into a twisted reflection of its own chaotic reality. The survivors, driven by Kale's leadership, began to rebuild. They salvaged wood from the wreckage, constructed makeshift shelters, and hunted whatever meager game they could find. But the Whisperwind continued to press against the barrier, its influence growing stronger with each passing day. Visions plagued their dreams, whispers tormented their waking hours, and the very air crackled with unseen energy. Anya, haunted by her secret, watched as the survivors struggled, their hopes dwindling with each passing sunset. She tried to find another solution, poring over ancient texts she carried with her, seeking a loophole, a miracle. But there was nothing. One evening, as the aurora borealis danced across the sky, painting the snow-covered landscape in ethereal colors, Kale approached her. He was haggard, his face lined with fatigue, but his eyes held a resolute calmness. "You have a way to stop this," he said, his voice low and steady. Anya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Tell me what I need to do," he said. "Are you sure? This is irreversible." Kale met her gaze, unwavering. "I'm sure we can't let this madness consume us all. I've seen enough death in my life. I'd rather choose my own ending than watch others suffer." Anya explained the ritual, the incantation, the precise placement of the artifact. She told him of the pain, the searing agony of having one's soul torn asunder. Kale listened in silence, his face betraying no fear. "When do we do it?" he asked when she was finished. "Tonight," Anya said. "It's our best chance." The ritual was performed under the watchful eyes of the aurora, the swirling colors mirroring the turmoil within Anya's heart. Kale stood before the artifact, his face illuminated by the eerie glow. Anya chanted the ancient words, her voice trembling with sorrow and determination. As the final syllable echoed across the frozen landscape, the artifact pulsed with blinding light. Kale screamed, a sound that tore through the night, a sound of unimaginable pain. Then, silence. The light subsided, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the air. Anya felt a surge of power, a wave of energy emanating from the artifact. The terror in reality was mending. Kale lay motionless on the ground. Anya knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his still chest. There was no heartbeat, no breath. He was gone. The survivors gathered around, their faces a mixture of grief and relief. They understood what Kale had done, the sacrifice he had made to save them all. In the days that followed, the whisper wind receded, its influence diminished. The creatures that had plagued their dreams vanished, and the air grew clean and clear. But the cost was immense. Kale's death weighed heavily on Anya's soul. She had been a catalyst, an instrument of fate, but she could not escape the guilt of her actions. She had traded one life for many, but the memory of Kale's sacrifice would forever haunt her. As the spring thaw began, a search party finally reached the crash site. The survivors were rescued, hailed as heroes for enduring the impossible. Anya, however, remained in the shadows. She had no desire for fame or recognition. Her duty was to protect Erthos from the terrors that lurked beyond the veil, a duty she would continue to fulfill, even if it meant carrying the burden of countless sacrifices. She left behind a single white flower, a symbol of remembrance and gratitude. As she turned to leave, she felt a gentle breeze on her face, a whisper in the wind, a silent acknowledgement of her actions. Anya knew that her journey was far from over. The whisper wind would always be a threat, and there would always be artifacts that needed to be contained. She was a warden, a jailer of forgotten terrors, and her curse was a burden she would carry for the rest of her days. But she would also carry the memory of Kale's sacrifice, a reminder that even in the darkest of times there was always hope, and that sometimes the greatest act of heroism was the willingness to give everything for the sake of others. Its curse whispered of prophecy and choices, of the potential to alter the past. The weight of Kale's sacrifice, the burden of her role, pressed heavily on her. Using the locket, she could potentially avert the plane crash, save Kale, and prevent the whisper wind from ever breaching Erthos. But tampering with the past, the consequences were unimaginable. Could she risk unraveling the very fabric of reality, potentially creating a future far worse than the present? The moral dilemma returned, sharper and more agonizing than before.